Hello and welcome to Lesson 1 of the Games for All Game Design Challenge. My name is Lindsay Buckle, and I'm the Manager of Strategy here at Legends of Learning. And we are so excited that you're joining us here today. Our goal is to empower students through a virtual game design challenge with support from game development professionals. Experts from Dell Technologies, Code Combat, Unity Technologies, Roblox, the Gamers, and Exploding Kittens are thrilled to be able to share their wealth of knowledge with students all over the world. They'll be discussing everything from game development to prototyping, all the way to playtesting and polishing your game. And if you're a winner, you'll receive a premium swag bag with amazing items from each of these incredible companies. Today, we're going to be diving into Lesson 1 of the Game Design Challenge. Lesson 1 explored creating your game concept and planning out your game design. Here to speak with you all about Lesson 1 is Thomas Winkley from Unity Technologies. Thomas is a technical marketing advocate at Unity, as well as a Unity certified programmer and instructor. He is also a fighting game commentator, community organizer, and an amateur pizza enthusiast. Thomas is going to dive into planning for success, tips for creating concepts and prototyping games. After his presentation, we're going to open the floor to any questions that you have for him or for us about the challenge. So Thomas, please take it away.
All right. I was told that when that happens, that y'all can hear me and see me. So I'm going to go out on a limb and say that's working, and production will yell in my ear if it's not. Hi, everybody. I'm Tom or Thomas. My throat is very dry, apparently, and I'm glad you're all here today to learn about some game concepting, some prototyping, and thank you, Lindsay, for the amazing intro. I am stunned to be among so many incredible people. My wife and I actually play Exploding Kittens like once a month. So, hey, Exploding Kitten folks, if you're watching that, big fan over here. Hi. So, but again, talking about the game design challenge, I do want to cover something that to me is really, really, really important. And you can see when it gets skipped how things turn out. And it's really creating the concept, locking in your prototype and testing, and then using that to drive yourself and your design forward. So I definitely want to talk about that and make sure y'all have a good footing to start with. It'll make your game production a lot faster, specifically when you're working in something like a game jam where you're on a fixed time limit, right? And I think we can all think of some games that maybe could have used better production planning, and they try to deliver on a tight timeline, and they may or may not meet the expectations that we all have as gamers ourselves, right? So let's start at the basics. What is a game concept? Just in case anybody watching doesn't know, it is, in the simplest form, it's a vision for your game. Who's the player? Why are they there? What do they do? What are the purposes for them to even exist in this world? What's the world like? What are the controls like? And what can we do with it? All of those things can fall underneath the concept, right? But a lot of times you want this to be like an elevator pitch, a quick sentence that can describe your game so you can just talk quickly about it to others. My game is about a plumber who jumps through pipes and steps on turtles' heads because he hates turtles for some reason, right? Now we know it's probably Mario. Also, I don't know why Mario hates turtles, but if I ever meet him, I'll ask him. So the next word I'm going to use a lot is scope. This is a really common word thrown around in a ton of different industries, but it is very specific to gaming, right? Scope is the extent that you're going to cover. In games, this really means what mechanics will I have and what features will it include? I just looked at my slide and realized that is almost not English. I probably should have dialed my scope in a little bit and made sure the mechanics of my slides, like the words, were fixed, right? So, but in games, again, what do I have? What do I do? And what features will I include? This is so important because it is super easy to run into something called scope creep, which we'll talk about in a little bit. So that being said, a way that you can design and scope your document is through a game design document. They help limit your scope, and they allow you to focus on your project pieces without adding unnecessary things. That is what I mentioned earlier, scope creep. A lot of times you'll be building out a project, you'll be working on something, you're going to be thinking about how you want to apply something, and you'll say, oh, but wouldn't it be really cool if You know what? Yes, he needs to be able to double jump. I want them to double jump. That's step one. And you know what? I think it would be really cool if she could slide, and also if she had a fireball she could throw from her hands. Oh, how cool would it be if there was an entire other level over here that you could explore that was a room full of chainsaws, right? And you start getting these really great ideas because as you're making a game and as you're working, things are hitting you and you're getting excited and you're passionate. So when you start adding those things and tacking them on, that's scope creep. And what that means is suddenly this very focused piece of content that you can probably build within your timeline starts to get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And it starts to balloon a little bit out of control. Sometimes adding features is good, but when you let it go wild, right? When you let that jungle overgrow all your thoughts, suddenly you have to build this mechanic and this mechanic and this mechanic. And now as a programmer, you have to program 30 systems instead of 2. And now you need 150 art assets instead of 10. And now you've got to build out 4 different levels and scenes instead of 1, right? And so it starts to grow. It's also very easy to have to modify and fix those. And to go forward, you're going to struggle with things like, oh, does this code integrate with this code? Or is this even fun? Does the game make sense together? Is it cohesive? These are all things that can happen when scope creep gets out of control. So I definitely recommend keeping that in control. I was really hoping to have a slide with like some kind of scary Muppet on it, but as I was looking at them, I realized that all Muppets are just beautiful and wonderful. So if you can think of something that scares you, label that scope creep. So to help prevent that, I really recommend using like a design document, right? And we have a basic template here you can use for free. I've got the URL. I don't know if I have permission to drop it in the Twitch chat, but I am going to drop it in the meeting chat, and we'll see if one of the administrators will post it for me. But you can grab this, and this will ask you to make a copy. And I promise production, this is the only time I'm going to alt tab, but I'm going to do it to you. So I'm sorry. Forgive me if I may. But when you try to jump in and do this to fix the scope creep, maybe I won't alt tab because I have a lot of Zoom window with Chrome windows and none of them are what I want. We're just going to go back to it. When you grab this link, it's going to bring up a Chrome window that's going to ask you to copy your document. And you can simply make a copy and it will copy it to your Google Drive. And then you can fill it out in the cloud just like this. And this is really nice because it lets you know, who are you? What is your basic gameplay? What sound effects do I need? What gameplay mechanics am I building? What's my user interface going to look like? And are there any other features? And it also gives you a way to break down your project sketches and your milestones and timeline, which is super important when you're building out a game. Producers are a job that not a lot of folks think about when they're going into the game industry that are massively important. People need to manage timelines. If you don't, how are they going to know when things are due, when things are deliverable? How am I going to know what's most important for me as a programmer or an artist? So this type of stuff is very helpful when you're lining out a game. Okay, no more alt tabbing. I'm sorry to production, and thank you. So with that, you can then fill it out and start talking about the things I covered when I pulled that document up. Who are you? Where are you? And how are you interacting, right? What are the pickups? What are the power-ups? What are the people thinking about? And using that, you can then start to dial in your tests and your ideas about the game, and you can design and build things, okay? From here, if you ever get stuck, if you ever lose focus, you check back to the document. And that's why it's so important. Specifically when you're working in like a jam or a playtest scenario, or you're really crunching on a project you're excited about, it's very easy to lose focus or get tired. Or maybe you talked to your co-workers a few hours ago, your colleagues a few hours ago about what they want to implement, and you get super far down the rabbit hole of building it, and you forgot what they said, or you forgot the main point of what you were doing. If you're documenting everything in your game design document, you can just go back to that and knock it out. So you want to make sure that you write things down and you focus on your game design document. Weird that my next slide coincides with that. And you want to make sure to write things down. If you make changes, document those changes. Now, super tiny slight changes, maybe you don't have to document, right? If you decide that the main character is going to wear a green jacket instead of a red jacket, if you have an art direction, sure, document it. But more importantly, if the character's goal now is to eat all of the sandwiches instead of make all of the sandwiches, you want to write that down. That's a massively important difference. That changes your end result. If the goal at the end of the game right now is to have 10 sandwiches and you write it down, eat all the sandwiches, your player will never achieve their goal. It's also lunchtime and I'm very hungry. So I would like to eat 10 sandwiches. But that being said, document your changes. If you add a scene, if you add a level, if you remove a mechanic, if you modify how a mechanic works, if you change what the power-ups are, document it and write it down so that if you're working in a team or by yourself and you forget, you can come back and check and be like, oh, that's right. You know what? Yesterday we decided that instead of eating 10 sandwiches, we were going to eat 10 pizzas. And we need to make sure that we get pizza assets from the artists, not sandwiches. But the power-ups are going to function the same, so the code is still going to work like I wanted it. Or when the power-ups go off, now we need red particles instead of gray particles because the pizza is going to have pepperoni or whatever. Like, you have to make sure that you're documenting that so that your pipeline moves fluidly and consistently. Okay? So let's talk about building to a theme, and specifically the theme y'all are working towards. So the theme is games for all, right? And I'm actually a huge proponent and fan of this theme, mainly because I believe that all games should be designed with inclusivity and accessibility in mind. It's actually a huge thing that my team believes as well at Unity. We're on the social impact and academic and nonprofit team. We really believe that. So when you're going to build the game and you're going to build the theme, think about a couple of things. Who's going to play my game? Who does my theme exclude? Who does my game mechanic exclude? How does it exclude them? And then think, okay, it excludes them. How can I make it include them? As an example, what if somebody's missing some fingers and you're expecting them to play on a controller and use all 8 of their fingers? Can you design a one-handed control theme? Potentially. What if somebody being differently abled has different vision than you do? They could have lower vision. They could be colorblind. They could have an astigmatism, whatever. Is your game really hard to play if you can't differentiate colors? What if somebody's a member of the deaf community? Can your game be played if they can't hear the game? Right? You have to ask these questions because you don't know who you're excluding, and then answer them for yourself. How can it include them? How can we stay together with them? How can we do those things? So when you're thinking about your theme, Games for All, please take that into consideration and write it down. I'm going to say it a lot. I'm saying it like 100 times. Write it down. Who's playing? How does my theme or my utilization of the theme exclude them? And how can it include them? And then look back at your scope creep and make decisions appropriately. But I promise, if you start thinking about this at the beginning with this in mind, you will have an overall better experience. You'll have more folks wanting to play your game, and it'll be a lot easier at the end when you're going back and making microscopic changes to your game to finish it up. Cool? Cool. I'm going to assume that there's 5,000 people all nodding in unison right now. If that's not the case, please don't type it in chat. I would like to prefer that I'm speaking to 1 million people. So let's talk about prototyping. You've documented everything. You figured out what you want to do. You know what your theme is. You know what you're going to do to manage that theme, and you know who your players are and what they're doing. How do we test then? What you want to do when you prototype is you want to find the fun. What makes this game fun? These shots are from a project I worked on during the Create with Code Game Jam. I was just kind of playing in the background while I was supporting and helping people. And this is a game called Don't Get Caught. And the whole point is you're this wonderful young lady. She's trying to get up a mountain without getting touched by the aliens. Just don't get touched, don't get caught. And so these are some screenshots of me playtesting it to see if it was fun. It was okay. It has a long way to go before being fun. But while you're finding the fun, also, if you have friends and family available that you can send these builds to or these quick ideas to and test with them, see if they're having fun. Also, see if they're playing the game the way you expected them to play it. Hey, if they're doing things in your game that you're thinking, I never expected them to do it that way, those signs point that you might have built a really fun and maybe more complex game than you thought. And that's great. But definitely test. Is it fun? And ask them, are you having fun? And if, make sure they're not afraid to hurt your feelings. Let them know, if you're not having fun, I'm okay with it. I want to make it fun. What do you think would be more fun? What ideas do you have? The next thing with prototyping, you don't always need assets. You can use grayboxing. Grayboxing is the method of using primitives, which are, cubes, spheres, capsules, planes, quads, in creating the world and testing your gameplay. You can kind of see this rapid build of me doing some quick prototyping, setting a little room up, and just testing some stuff. You can do this, and you can also code in a lot of your interactions. And then if you're working with an artist, or you're getting assets from Unity's asset store or different asset packs, you can then go and start substituting those objects for the primitives you've put in. But this helps you get a really good feeling of how the space is going to work, how it's going to feel, and it allows you to work faster because you can start coding and building out these interactions and testing things without waiting for art assets to do so. So you can both kind of work asynchronously or in parallel as you're building things up together and sharing things back and forth. Okay, so let's talk about prototyping for all. I talked about designing games for all. Let me add prototyping for all. While you're testing your builds, while you're prototyping, ask yourself those questions. Who can play my game? What are these mechanics I'm coding interrupting? Who am I excluding? Who can I play this with? Who's going to hang out with me? Could I play this with so-and-so? Who are the people I want in this game? Can I also play this with one hand? Could I play it with visual impairments? What about auditory impairments? Well, you could also just jump to the next slide immediately. But think about that. Test it. Can I play this one-handed? Can I play this if I can't see the screen? Can I play this if I perceive the screen differently? Can I play this if I can't hear the audio cues? Think about all those things. And are there ways I can move around it and make the game more accessible and more inclusive for everybody? Right? Also think about it on, does this resonate with everybody? People who don't look like me, people who don't think like me. Can this be more broadly and communally shared so that everybody gets to feel included and be involved? The more you can think about that, the better your game will be. And the easier it'll be when you don't have to make any of those changes going down the road. So I hope you all learned a ton. I believe next up, we're going to have some Q&A. I'm really glad you all were here. And honestly, thank you so much for letting me give this presentation. Remember, no matter what happens, keep working on fun games, keep creating, keep building stuff, and keep testing yourself as you learn to work with Unity and anything else inside of real-time 3D. And I know we saw the post in chat, but just to remind you all, you can type questions in the Twitch chat. I do have it up, and we will also be responding to those as well. So thank you again. I think it's Q&A time, and I think Lindsay's going to take back over for a second, if I remember right.
Yes, absolutely. Wow, thank you so much, Thomas. Your tips for creating concepts and prototyping games will absolutely be invaluable to challenge participants as they dive into starting their game. And I'll also be sharing your project design document that you had up in the follow-up email to this presentation so that all participants can use it in their design process. Awesome. So like Thomas said, we're now going to open up the floor for questions. So if you have any questions for me or for Thomas, you can submit them in the chat now. And while we wait for people to start typing, we did have a few questions come in during your presentation. So I'll start with those. And the first one, I'm really excited to hear the answer to. What is your favorite game that you've ever made?
Yeah, so it's not something that was published globally. It wasn't picked up by a developer or anything. But when I first started learning and working with Unity, I got this opportunity to work on a project called Swords and Shovels. It was built by a company I worked for. And the plan was, we're going to build this really awesome playable level of a dungeon crawler, and then we're going to reverse engineer it and teach people how to build it out. And so for me, I actually had never used Unity when this started. I was working with kind of the production side of things. I was also recruiting developers to help us build it. And it taught me a lot of what I know about Unity. So to me, it's very special because it kind of changed my career path. It changed what I'm doing, but also the people I got to work with are all friends that I've kept going forward, and we all get along very well. Also, the dwarf character kind of looked like me, and I secretly kind of love that too. So yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. And it's so true. Like you said, every kind of experience that you have or opportunity that you get can really change your path, and that's what we're really hoping with this challenge, is that students, get to design a game for a first time and can really have one of those kind of like life moving experiences with themselves or with their friends as well. But great. So the next question has to do with the theme. I know you talked about it both in creating the concept and when prototyping. And this question is kind of about the beginning, about right when you're starting to build your concept. And the question is, should you create your game idea first and then incorporate the theme Games for All? Or should you create a game idea with the theme already in mind?
So I'm going to give you a really terrible answer. It's yes. Um, and the reason for that is inspiration comes in a lot of ways. If you have not thought about what type of game you want to build, I think you should definitely think the theme is Games for All. What kind of games would be really neat under that umbrella? And then once you've got that brainstormed and kind of written down and figured out, then you're going to think, how do I tie all of this back to different pieces and kind of connect it in, right? That's kind of how I would think about that. If there's a type of game you're already passionate about, that happens sometimes. I've run game jams where folks come in and 2 days before we reveal the theme, they're like, I'm going to build a platformer and there's going to be fireworks and pizza and roller skates. And I'm like, cool. And then I give them the theme and they're like, how do those 4 things connect to the theme? And you can do that too, right? Depending on how strict the connectivity of the theme is, there's definitely a way to do it. For example, roller skates, pizza, and fireworks are applicable for everybody because they're all really fun, right? You can find ways to tie that together and build it. So if you have an idea before, it is totally fine to figure out how it ties to the theme. If you don't have an idea, I think you'll have a much easier experience if you think about the theme, brainstorm underneath that umbrella, and then tie things to it from there.
Okay, yes, that makes such sense to me. It's kind of like you said, it depends on where you're starting from and what experience you have with creating games in the past. So awesome. I love that people can come at it either way, whichever one's most comfortable. Awesome. So I think this one maybe has to do with your project design document that you shared and really kind of talking about scope creep in the terms of features. So the question is, how do you know how many features you can build in an available time frame? For example, is there a certain amount of time you should set aside for each feature?
Wow, that's a really good question. I think it's a little harder when you're beginning, right? Because you may not know how comfortable you are at something, but the further you get down the developer rabbit hole, the more you'll be like, oh, I know how to write a character controller, for example. Like I've written 100 of them. So for me, I could probably write a character controller really fast. Or I already know how to use certain features to make the camera follow. So for me, I know it'll take me 5 minutes to set up a camera follow. But if you've never done it before, the one thing I would recommend is if your game only needs 3 systems and you've never written any of those systems before, you're probably pretty comfortable to say, cool, I'm just going to build these. The other thing you can do is document what your game will need to get what a lot of people call a minimum viable product or an MVP. So what is the minimal amount of things this game needs to be fun or to work and get my idea across? And if the answer is 6 systems and you think, man, that's a lot, I don't think I can do it, maybe shelve that idea and re-brainstorm an idea that needs less or find ways to cut it down. But I really think you just have to kind of learn to know yourself. And of course, as you're working and you start looking at your timeframes, you always want to reevaluate. I've only written 1/3 of my game, but I've used half my time. I need to adjust here and dial back. So you can always be checking with yourself to see how progress. And if you're working on a team, communicate and ask, hey, y'all, can we do this? Do you feel comfortable doing this? And work together and understand that it's okay to say no and really build that comfort level with each other where you're supporting and uplifting each other through, can you do this? Can I help you do this? Or you don't feel comfortable doing this, but I do. Do you feel comfortable doing this piece? And really share that work evenly so you can all go back and reassess every couple of hours. So.
Yes, absolutely. And I think what you said is so key when you're working on a team. It's really all about communication and really making sure that we're supporting each other, that we're collaborating, and that, we're doing time management together as a team to get to the finish line of our project.
Yeah, it's fun because when we run game jams, a lot of the teams ask us well, how much should we communicate? And my thoughts are, of course you need to drink water and take walks and sleep and take care of yourself. But if you're working on this game for 72 hours, you should be in a voice chat with each other for 71 of those hours if possible. There's no such thing as over communicating when you're all working on a project on a timeline. So
yes, absolutely. Awesome. So I think this is the last question that came in, and it's a little similar. Again, it's about scope creep because, for a lot of people, this is the first project that they're building all the way through. And so they're wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about scope creep and some additional tips or examples to really manage your scope.
Sure. So something for me is I'm a people pleaser. I love to say yes, and it gets me in trouble. So know that you need to create an environment of safety of like, if I don't deliver this, it's okay. Or maybe one thing I do a lot when I'm building a project is, you know what? I'm only going to get to this minimum viable project today. But if I really enjoy this, I can keep developing this after the game jam. I just can't show it off to all these folks, right? Unless you stay in touch and connected. So you can always keep working on a project after a game jam, after an application jam, after a hackathon, whatever. That's a big one. And then also like communication again, talk about it and why. Hey, I think this would be really powerful for these reasons. Can we achieve this? And the we can be your team. The we can be yourself and the action figure on your desk you talk to while you're working alone. It doesn't matter who it is, but ask that question and give honest feedback of, I don't think we're going to make it if we add this, or actually that's really important and we need to add it. How do we make it work? And have those honest conversations and
Yeah.
write it down if you decide to change things.
Yeah. And always write it down. Absolutely. Perfect. So we had one more question come in, and I think we have a little more time. So the question is, you talked a lot about accessibility with students with different abilities and different ways of experiencing games. So does Unity have any good resources to help participants consider accessibility when building their game?
So I would have to do some Google searching to see what we have and some searching in our Learn platform. We definitely have like some ideas and blog posts about it, but there's a ton of resources as well if you jump in Google and you can search. And that is stuff that we are looking at building out and kind of helping with. Because it shouldn't be, but there's a lot of research behind it, but the content side of it's a little bit behind on getting it out there. But there is a lot of things you can consider. And depending on the type of application you're building too, a lot of them for their publisher store rules will have things. So for example, building something for like MetaQuest, there's actually, as part of their VRCs, which are virtual reality checks, there are accessibility requirements built into those. But not a ton right now, aside from advocates like myself going out and saying, you need to make sure you do this, and a lot of internal people building content, but more is coming and it will continue to be driven forward. So.
Yes, absolutely. Like you said, you can Google a little bit, and during the opening ceremony, our speaker from Dell actually provided some examples as well. And so those are on the website. So if anyone is looking back for those, I think it was Able Gamers, and then really fun look into the Xbox controller. That's great for students of all needs.
Yeah, that Xbox controller is incredible, and Able Gamers does amazing work. They have a heavy presence in the fighting game community. I'm a big fan of Able Gamers. So
that's awesome. That is great to hear. Well, awesome. Thank you all so much for all of your thoughtful questions. If any other questions arise as you work through starting your project or any of the other lessons, please do not hesitate to email events@legendsoflearning.com, and I'll get back to you right away. And I know for myself and from Thomas, we just want to wish you good luck, have so much fun as you embark on this project, and we absolutely cannot wait to see all of your submissions on May 1st. Thanks, everyone.
see ya. Bye. Please send us your submissions. I want to see them.